Hey everyone, welcome to the June Jira Admin for Beginners. This is the sixth time we're doing this. I'm going to change things up ever so slightly. I knocked out a couple of topics at the beginning, so we're going to just jump into more exciting things, I would say it as. And so we're going to have some fun with it today. So in the chat, let me know where you're tuning in from. Let me know if this is your first time here, your second time here, maybe it's your sixth time. Let me know where you are, what's going on in your world. But specifically, let me know where you're coming from and let me know how many times you've been to this particular training, if this is the multiple second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth time that you've been here. So let me know in the chat. And I'm going to get my screen here ready. We're going to jump into the presentation material and just jump right into it. Little quick disclaimer, though. I may have overdone it last night. I did a live stream on my main channel yesterday, and might have pushed myself a little longer than I should have, and I'm paying for it with my voice today. So hopefully it's coming out clear, and hopefully you guys can still hear me okay. But yeah, it's definitely hurting. Every syllable is coming out. It's hurting a little bit. Pat Murphy from Colorado, first time. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you being here, Pat. Hope you enjoyed this. This is going to be a fun one. So this is my more technical class that I do here. And so we're going to get into some serious stuff here with respect to your admins. We got Whale Howdy from Barcelona, Spain. Second time here. We got Dagny, first time for me, coming in from Iceland. Okay, welcome. We do have a good friend of mine, Christian, who's also from that side of the world. Smita Nair, India, second time. Welcome. Andy, of course, it wouldn't be a live stream without Andy, so welcome, Andy, for being here. Multiple times, still a beginner. Oh boy, I don't know if that says something about my teaching skills. Hopefully we can turn this around, Andy, and get you at least to a novice level. All right. So welcome again, Jira Admins for Beginners, ACE 2024 for June. Here's what we're going to be learning. So I removed the project stuff. We're just going to jump into it. We're going to assume you got a Jira project. We're going to assume it's a company managed software project, because if you're a Jira admin, that is your optimal configuration. Software, company managed project. Now, whether it's Scrum or Kanban, that's less relevant. But if you're going to be a Jira admin and you want to unleash the full power of being a Jira admin, that's going to be the configuration that you want to be optimized for, right? Because these team managed projects, they're not going to do it, right? They're really designed for non-Jira admins. And so company is where it's at. So because of that, and I just gave you what you needed to know about projects, we're going to kick things off with issue types, workflows, and custom fields and screens. And then we'll cover some next steps. But before, a little bit about me. Who am I? Why am I quote unquote qualified to be here? So I got a bachelor's in computer engineering, a master's in systems engineering. I have been using the Jira product as an administrator since October of 2016. So it's been a few years now. I've used it both as a power user and as a power admin. And so lots of experience. Currently today, I spend 12 to 14 hours every single day inside of the tool, inside of Jira, getting better every day, because guess what? Atlassian likes to change the tool every single day. So you kind of have to put in the work and the repetitions here with Atlassian, because it's constantly changing. Now you're watching this on the Jira Live, so I do encourage you to scan that QR code there. And if you're watching this on the Jira Live and you haven't subscribed to this channel, I highly recommend, implore of you really, to subscribe. Smash the subscribe button right now. The Jira Live is a project that the Jira guy, aka Rodney, and I have started. We have our producer Bob and my wife, who's all on board with all this as well. And we are trying to build the ultimate Atlassian community. And so the Jira Live here, we meet up every single Thursday. In fact, we're going to be live streaming in a few hours today. So come back at 2 p.m. Pacific time. And we're going to be interviewing today an OG Atlassian creator. I'm very, very excited for that. We have a lot of fun on the Jira Live. So if you're looking for somewhere cool, somewhere to meet other people that are interested in the world of Atlassian, but you don't want to fly all over the world, well, the Jira Live comes to you and your screen. So make sure you smash the subscribe button on the Jira Live. All right, we'll get back to this at the end. Without any further ado, let's just jump into issue type. So we're going to be covering four critical things that you got to know. I want to talk to you about epics, the standard issue types, our subtasks, and the hierarchy, right? And so if you've never been to one of my courses, this is about it. We're done with the slides. For the rest of the course, we're going to be inside of the wonderful world of Jira. I'm a big believer that you got to learn the stuff from the tool. So feel free to pull up your Jiras, log in, roll up your sleeves, and we're just going to jump right into it and start talking about issue types. So what exactly is an issue type, right? So an issue type in general, right, it's a collector of information. And in Jira, we don't just create tasks, right? We don't just create a thing. It's not linear. So when you compare Jira with other tools like Asana and Trello and Monday.com, those tools are very linear. In fact, I was having a conversation with Brittany Joyner, Trello queen. She loves Trello. And we were comparing like Trello and other tools like that, Monday and Asana. Imagine a 2D platformer of Mario, right? So imagine new Super Mario Brothers style. I guess that's even a little bit too 3D. Imagine OG 1996 Super Mario World, right? Very two-dimensional. Just go one way. You really don't have much. There's no going back, right? There's no 3D aspects to it. But Jira, Jira is really more like Super Mario 64, where for the first time it's multi-dimensional, right? There's a hierarchy, and it's not just one linear way. It's multifaceted. And so I kind of want to explain the multifacetedness of Jira and how it works, so that you as a Jira admin, you can craft this tool to work best for your team. Because again, it's not just one thing, not just one task. Not all work is created equal. And so these issue types from an admin perspective allow you to enable your teams to get very creative with what they do in their configuration. So we'll start there, because everything else, workflows and screens and all the other settings, they really fundamentally depend on that issue type. So you really do want to get that issue type correct. Otherwise, you will have bad things happen downstream. So how do we get to our issue types? Well, by default, every single project, right? Whenever you hit create project and you make a project, it's going to ship with a predetermined set of issue types. And those issue types are determined when you hit create project and you pick your template. There's an issue type setting over here that kind of determines what are the issue types, right? So what is already out of the box, what is available in your project. So that's going to be mandated by that template. And you have a lot of templates to choose from, right? But sometimes that's not enough, right? Sometimes maybe you want something like a new issue type, like a spike, right? So maybe your team is an agile team and you're being requested like, hey, I want to add a new issue type. Well, how do you add a new issue type? Well, it's really a two-step process. I'm going to show you 2 steps today. And so when we go to create a new issue type, there's a little gear up here. Now, if you're a new Jira admin, you need to become very, very intimate with this little gear, because the amount of times that I click on this little gear on a day-to-day basis, like I'd be like a billionaire right now, right? Like if I got a penny for every time I click on this dumb little gear, like I would have collected and amassed so many pennies that I'd have like $1 billion at this point, right? So as a Jira admin, this little gear here is like your best friend, right? Best friend. And so when you click on this little gear, the next setting, right, you're going to have a lot of Jira settings here, but the one that we're interested in is issues. As you can see here underneath, it says configure your issue types. Guess what? That's what we're going to be doing, right? So we click on issues, and naturally that will take us straight into the issue types configuration setting. But you'll notice that issue types here as a whole contains 4 sections, and these are the 4 sections that we're going to be focusing on today. Okay. So first of all, what do we see here, right? What are we seeing here? We're going to see the name, right? So this is the name of that issue type. You can call these things whatever you want. I have access, ask a question, but you can have things like cheeseburger, right? You can have whatever you want, or really whatever your team asks for. Now, really, this is where becoming a Jira admin becomes a little bit harder, because the hardest thing, in my opinion, about being a Jira admin is not knowing how to add an issue type or create a new issue type, but rather knowing when to say no. If somebody were to come to me and say, hey, I want a cheeseburger issue type, I'd be challenging that. I'd be challenging that real deeply, because like, why? What's the point of the cheeseburger issue type, right? It's almost kind of silly to have one. And so you really do want to question and challenge this, right? Because just because you have the power to do it doesn't mean you should always do it. So that's what the names are here. Now we have something called the hierarchy level. And in Jira, as I mentioned, right, there's multiple levels of hierarchy. It starts at -1, 0, then 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm not sure how high you can go, but I usually go, the highest I've been is 3, right? So -1, 2, 3, so 5 levels. But that's usually the sweet spot. It's either 4 to 5 different levels, and I do have to disclose something. In order to leverage this hierarchy, in order to take advantage of this to the fullest, right? So by default, everybody gets 3 levels of hierarchy. You have what's called an epic, which we're going to cover in a second. You have your standard issue types, which is what you see on your screen here. And then we have the subtask, which I'll show you in another second. So those 3 levels, everybody gets for free. But if you want to add an issue type above the epic, then you do need to be in the premium version of Jira. And I'm going to show you how that works in a second as well. But I just want to let you know that depending on which flavor, how much you're paying for Jira, your hierarchy is going to be a little bit more meaningful than not. Okay. And so in the related schemes here, this tells you which scheme, so think of schemes as a bucket, which bucket is this issue type available in. And what's important for you to know is that these buckets, notice that we have a lot of buckets, a lot of schemes in here, right? These buckets are then associated to a project, right? So which is why usually if you've been if you've seen this course before, you'll know that I usually start with the project and kind of explain the project in a little bit more detail, because the project fundamentally drives everything else. But you just got to assume, I'm assuming that you have a project, you know how projects work. And so all you got to know that these issue types, they go into a project, and they go into those projects via what's called an issue type scheme. And so we'll get into that in a minute as well. So that's essentially what you're seeing here, right? And so what do you do here? What do you do in this screen? Well, there's really only a couple of things that you would do in this particular screen under issue type. The first thing that you would do is this is where you come to add new issue types. So let's just make Bob a little bit more hungry, right? Let's just say we're going to add a taco issue type, right? Just going to have some fun with it here. When I hit enter, when I hit create, right, because it's really fast, as you saw, if you blinked, you might have missed it, right? I now have a taco issue type. In fact, if I go, I think these might be in alphabetical order, and if I need my alphabet, I get there a little quicker. But where's my T's? Here's a T. You can see that I just created a taco issue type, okay? And this is important, right? Because the taco issue type exists now. It's a thing that now exists in my Jira world. It doesn't do anything yet, but the taco's there. The hierarchy level 0, right? And you might have missed how that became a 0, but I'll show you in a second. And then it's in the default issue type scheme, which basically means there's one issue type scheme that everybody, it just exists as the default, and that's that one. So not all projects use that one, but it always, the moment you create it, it becomes available, right? It's just part of the general pool. But the two things that we usually do in this screen, right, is create new issue types. And then the second thing that I do is I change this dumb, ugly icon here. I hate this icon. It's one of the most bland, boring icons. So I click on the 3 dots on the right, and almost always after I click or create a new issue type, I come in and change the avatar. And I do that for 2 reasons, right? I do it, reason number 1 is I hate the gray. I hate that gray icon. This ugly looking box just drives me insane. But the reason number 2 is every time you create a new issue type, it always defaults to this gray box. So what you're going to end up with is like 50 issue types that all have that boring, bland, ugly, depressing gray box. And so I like to come in and just spice it up and change things up a little bit. Who here hates a gray circle? Yeah, so I absolutely do not like. Anybody else share their love or hate relationship with that gray circle box square looking thing? Because I don't like it at all. Anyways, but that's essentially what I do in this particular screen. And that's it, right? So you're either creating new issue types or you're editing existing issue types. That's all that's happening here in this particular issue types button. Okay, so now you're wondering, like, so what do these numbers mean, right? Like, how do we manipulate the number? Because when I click on add issue type, I can pick a 0 or a -1, and that's it. Notice that there's no 1, there's no 2, there's no 3, right? Nothing else exists. But you'll notice that I do have a 2 and I do have a 1. So how does that work? Like, how do I manipulate these numbers? Because if you look, everything's going to be a 0. Almost everything's going to be a 0, right? But how do we get these 1s and these 2s? Well, that's where the hierarchy comes into play. So again, this is really only most beneficial if you're a premium. If you're not a premium or enterprise subscriber, then you're really not going to have a whole lot to do here, and you're just going to have to accept the defaults. And the default, and the sad reality really is that whenever you add a new issue type, your only option is to make it a 0 or a -1. So it can either be a regular, what Atlassian calls a standard issue type, or it can be a subtask issue type, which is going to be a -1. Being able to manipulate your 1 or your 2 or your 3, those numbers up above, is and will require you to be on premium or enterprise Jira. And so how exactly do we do this? How do we manipulate the numbers? Well, that's really easy. You come to this issue type hierarchy and you click on create a level. As you can see, I already have an initiative at level 2. So I'm going to create level 3 and I'm going to go tacos, right? Just going to call it tacos, and my Jira issue type, if you can guess it, is going to be a taco. I'm going to put that there and we're just going to hit save. And so you'll notice that I have now created a 6-tier hierarchy, right? I have subtasks, stories, epics, maybe 5 tiers. I don't know how to count in public. Initiatives, and then tacos, a 5-tier hierarchy, right? And so now if I go back to my issue types, you'll see my taco is automatically level 3, right? And so that's how those two are related, and that's how you manipulate those. So that manipulation of the numbers has to happen over here, but again, only available for these enterprise and premium users. Otherwise, if you're just on free or standard versions of Jira, you're stuck with zeros and -1. Sorry. Okay, so that's how these two work. Now let's go talk about subtasks real quickly. So what are the subtasks? So the subtasks are that -1. And so the subtask is a very, very special issue type. It's a very special issue type because it behaves just like the regular issue types, but they are in their own category for one and only one reason that I can interpret, right? This is my opinion. When you create an issue in Jira, there's this big blue button. Okay? And in this drop down, I'm going to show you how to manipulate, right? How to add issue types here. Don't forget to put your questions in the chat. Yes, absolutely. I am going to go back. I'm finding a good stopping point where I'm not in the middle of a train here or middle of a thought. But we'll get back to questions here. So please make sure you drop in those questions in the chat here. Okay. So anyways, so we have these issue types available. But notice that there's no subtasks, there's no risk, right? And that's by design. So subtasks behave in a very special way, and that is they can never be orphans. They can never exist on their own. Subtasks must always exist as a child of a level 0 issue type. So your stories, your tasks, your bugs, the taco before we made it a level 3, right? Those are all level 0. And so that -1 must always be latched. It has to be. It can't exist by itself to a level 0 issue type, okay? And so I guess for that reason, they get their own category over here. But in other words, you'll never be able to create a subtask using the create button. The only way to create subtasks is to go into the issue and click on the add child, and that'll give us the subtask. So that's what the subtasks are over here. And then the final thing that you got to worry about here with respect to the screen is the issue type schemes, right? And so the issue type schemes, as I mentioned, they're just buckets. They're just like a bunch of little buckets. And inside, kind of think of Halloween, right? We put our candies inside our bucket. So think of each issue type like a piece of candy that we're putting in our bucket. And that bucket belongs to somebody. Somebody has ownership of that bucket. And that, my friends, is the project. So one or many projects can share the bucket, which then by default shares the options there. Okay. Hey, everyone. So something green popped up on my screen here. So I just wanted to highlight this because this is the first time I'm seeing this. But Sharon BK, thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. Appreciate you taking the time and supporting the channel here, supporting the mission and vision that we got here for the Jira Life. So appreciate you, Sharon, for taking a minute here to support the channel. So thank you very much. Okay, so that's how the issue types work, right? And so we put them in a bucket, and that bucket gets associated to the project. Awesome, right? And so by me saying that, there's really two ways, right? So how do we go about adding a taco, right? Let's just say that we wanted to add a taco to this issue type scheme. So there's two ways to do it, right? First of all, I'm gonna leave it alone, right? But the first method is you can come into this issue type scheme, right? Under the gear, you go to issue type schemes, and we can go to actions, and we can click. I believe it's associate. Atlassian messes with you real deeply. It's not associate. Fake news. It's going to be edit. Sometimes edits the name. Sometimes edit actually does what you want it to do. Sometimes associate does what you want it to do, and sometimes it does something different. So welcome to the wonderful world of Atlassian. Okay. So we click edit, and you're going to see that for this particular scheme, right, the one that we were in, these are the issue types that are available. So if we want to add another issue type, right, step 1 is create the new issue type. But step 2 is go over here, find your taco, and we're going to just put it in this list here. And when we hit save, Jira's going to save it into memory. And now when I hit the create button for this particular project, I need to go find it. Something admin class. Dun, dun, dun. Where did anybody see it? Stop me when you see admin class. Here we go. April admin class. And I click the drop down for issue type. You're going to see that I now have a taco. And the beauty of it is if I change to another project, my taco is not there, right? And that's because, again, we're controlling it by using the issue type scheme. Now, I don't usually like going about it this way. I have really bad memory and I don't usually come to the issue type scheme. So what I usually do is I go into the project. So I'll go into this project here. I'll go to the project settings, and then I'm going to go to issues, and I'm going to click on types. And from here, this is the list of available issue types in this project. So I click on actions, edit issue types, and then I go and add my taco over here. So I can do this, hit save, and just like that, taco now exists in this particular project as well. So those are your two different flavors. You pick the one that you want. I like going through the projects just for the simple fact that I already know the container that I'm in. I already know which project I'm in. And otherwise, if you go just to the generic gear, then issues, and then issue types, you got to really know what you're looking for at that point. So that's kind of how and why I go that way. So anyway, so that's issue types in a nutshell. That's really all you can do. You can create new ones. You can add them to the projects. Obviously, you can remove some, right? You can delete them as well. But those are more givens than anything else. So we're going to take a little break here just to kind of see what's going on with the comments. We got a lot going on. I got a couple start comments. So let's go answer some questions. So I have an ACP 120 exam in 8 weeks outside of the free Atlassian training. What other educational resources do you recommend? I'm so ready for the exam. Is there a specific program for my case? I don't particularly know, but Mr. King Bob, if you want to chime in, please do feel free to chime in here and help me out if you got an answer. But ACP 120s, I do believe when you sign up for it, you may or may not get something. But I don't know that there's any official guides, right? I don't know that there's anything out there yet. One of my goals is to make ACP guides as I live stream, and I'm going to be learning and studying for these. But I don't think that there's anything out there. I will recommend this, though. I will tell you to do this in case you don't know. So over on YouTube, I got a buddy. His name's Jimmy. And guess what? Jimmy talks Jira. Right? So highly recommend you check out Jimmy because, again, he talks Jira. And Jimmy here, if you click on live, and I'll put a link here real quick into the chat, he does have a series of videos that he's been doing as a live stream, as kind of like a partner of mine, right? We partner with Atlassian, and we're doing these live trainings for folks. And so his topics were all the ACPs. So he's got a video on how to prepare for them, and then he gives you the good, the bad, the ugly, the tips, the tricks, the ins and the outs of each of the ACP. So I would recommend you go check out his. He's got about a 51-minute video here on ACP 120. So that would be my advice for you there. Okay. Pat Murphy says, another admin created an issue and set it to 0. It needs to be -1. Is there a way I can change it to a -1? That's a great question. I don't know that we can demote issue types, but let's go find out. So we can click on the gear here. We go back to issues, and it's very easy to set it to 0 because if you're not watching, right, it automatically will set it to a 0, right? It's set to 0 always, right? And so let's just say, let's take this one. Let's see if there's a way, right? So if I click on edit, that would be the only way I can think of, right? And we can see what's available. There's nothing available here. So that's going to tell me what the UI is telling me right now. I'm going to try one more thing. I'm going to try that translate button, see what it says, right? I don't know that yet. No, definitely not it. Okay. So the only thing that I would recommend then is you have to recreate the issue type, right? You have to delete this one because I don't think you want to have duplicates. So delete the level 0 one, and then you got to come into subtasks and recreate it. I would then urge your team to be much more careful, right? Be way more careful, because I don't think that there's a way. I don't think that I can actually force it to be another issue or another number on the scale without recreating it. So I would assume you got to recreate that. That would be my official answer. But somebody else, if you're smarter than me, let me know in the chat. Okay, so that takes us, again, Sharon, special thank you to Sharon for becoming a member. Really appreciate it. For everybody else, that button, if you're getting value, feel free to smash that membership button. We have different tiers if you want to just support the channel. We also do have, like, I guess, rewards, right? So depending on which level, you'll get shout outs during our live streams on the Jira Live. We also have a news bite I'm thinking of a magazine, a news bite that we put out every week. And so it goes out earlier to members. And so that's coming. And we're also working on some really cool stuff as well with the team here. So if you want to help support the channel, check those out. Okay, we got another comment here. Tech tutorials, Jimmy talks, Jira examples, Udemy, Jira guide. Yep. So a couple of other ones. So yep, and Well got the yep, perfect. All right, let's keep going then. So that was issue types. You kind of know everything there. Let's get into the meat of it, right? So we're probably going to stop here. Workflows is probably going to take the rest of the time, but that's okay because as a Jira admin, if I'm not adding issue types, I'm doing workflows. And if I'm not doing workflows, the only other real main challenging thing that I'm doing is fields. So we'll get into fields if we have time, but I'm going to try to give you as much information as I can about the workflows because the workflows are very, very important, right? So I wanted to start with issue types because as I mentioned at the beginning, issue types control influence is really the right word, influence everything else, right? And so when you go to a project, right, I'm going to just go into this SDFU project. And I want to manipulate the workflow. So first of all, what is a workflow, right? So the workflows are the statuses. It's the step that a piece of item, specifically an issue, it's going to go through, right? It's going to be like to do, in progress, and done. And those workflows typically correlate directly with the columns on your board. So you can see here, I have a to-do column, an in progress column, and a done column. And if I open up a story and I show you the statuses, you'll notice that I have a to-do status, in progress status, and a done status. So again, usually those are correlated one-to-one. Not all the time, but it can be and are sometimes, right? So how do we add new statuses? How do we add new columns? Well, there's a couple of different ways to do it. In my opinion, there's really only one way to do it correctly, right? Oops, sorry, we got a question here from Sharon, right? So if the issue type is recreated, does that mean you have to go back and reassign? If you have to recreate your issue type, it's not trivial, right? Especially if you're already gone down the road. Sorry, guys, we're gonna come back. See, this is why you become a member, because you get to pop yourself up to the top of getting your questions answered, right? And so if you have to redo your issue type, the first thing I would do is I would search for everything. I would almost kind of treat it like here's what I would do. I would go and create the subtask issue type, right? Let's just go through an example, right? This will be easier, right? So I'm gonna go to issues. I'm gonna go to issue types, and let's just say I want my axis to be a -1, right? Well, I can go to subtasks, and let me try this, right, guys? We're trying things live here. I'm not sure if this is gonna work, right? But if I click add, it doesn't let me do it. This is what I suspected, right? Because the issue type with that name already exists. So what I recommend you do is do a 1, right? And click add. Okay. Now, when you do that, that allows you to create the new issue type. But this is where the beginning of your problems really start. Because of the fundamentals of how an issue type works, specifically the subtask. And if you remember, the subtask has to be tied to a parent. So it's not as simple as like, hey, you now identify it as a subtask, right? It doesn't work that way, right? And so there's really two paths for you. There's an easy path, and that is under the axis issue type. There are no issues. There are no issues that have this issue type, and you can simply come in here and click delete, right? But as you can see, you're always going to have issues most of the time, right? And so you have to migrate these issues. So when you hit the delete button, you click on this little migrate issues, and it's going to pop up a window that is going to basically let you pick those 9 issues, right? And then you're going to do something with it. Now, for some reason, my UI is not working here. Didn't do what I thought it was going to do. So we're just going to go look for it here. Come on. Why aren't you? Okay, let's get rid of that. Axis. Okay, it doesn't want to work here. Let me start the search all over. So essentially what I'm trying to get to is if you're going to delete it, you got to find everything that is in that legacy one, the OG one, and you got to move it. You got to move it over. Why is it not finding axis? Do I not know how to spell axis? It only finds tacos. That is so weird. Let's go back over here. I hate that this, okay. Maybe I don't have any actual issue types with the word axis, but no, I do. Okay, let's try JQL. When in doubt, try JQL. Issue type equals access. Come on, there we go. Right? So this is going to find the issues that, so you see, so what I'm assuming is there's a project that has access issue types, but I don't have access to it. This is not a good example. I just don't have access, right? So if you, as an admin, spoilers, you might not have access to the actual issues. So this gets a little hard because now I got to go hunt for it, right? I got to go find these 9 active issues, but I can't find them, right? Because I can't see them. These particular issues, wherever they are, these 9 exist in a project that I just simply don't have access to. And so now I got to go and figure it out where the world it's at. So it's going to be in one of these 3 projects here. And so I have to go into these projects, right? Again, this is what I was telling you, like, this is the beginning of the end for you, right? Because it is a very complicated thing, right? You got to go into here. You got to give yourself a license. You got to give yourself access. In this particular case, I don't have access to this project. So I got to go add myself here real quick, right? As you can see, and give myself administrator. And that might not be the right project. So I got to go and do it on the other one as well. So it's a pretty involved process, as you can see here, right? And so let's see if that did it. Nope, not that one. So anyways, I don't want to take more time because I do really want to focus on the workflows, right? But long story short, if you're going to delete your issue type, you got to temporarily put it somewhere else. The problem with the going from a regular level 0 issue type to a -1 is that those -1s, when I do move them, you will and must identify a new parent for it. And that's where things get tricky because not all of them are going to have the same parent. So you're going to have to do some coordination, some figuring out of like, okay, who becomes the parent of that particular issue when I move it? Because it's not gonna like it, right? It's you just can't create a subtask and have it exist because it needs to be latched onto something else. So the subtask can't exist by itself. So you may have some trouble there. You might have to do some mapping, but that's essentially what you got to do. So if you're lucky though, there's no issue types or there's no issues associated to that issue type and you just delete it. So hopefully you catch it right away before people start using it. So that would be my advice for you there, Sharon. Okay, I'm watching this on work time and I get distracted by work sometimes. Can I watch this? Yes, this is recorded and on the Jira Life, you'll see this one and many others. And even though this is the 6th one, every single one of them are different. So I recommend you check them all out because every single time I do tweak and it's a same PowerPoint, but much different presentation every single time. So I highly recommend you check them all out. Okay. I did strain my voice yesterday, so. All right, let's keep going with the workflows then. So what are the workflows, right? So as I mentioned, we'll get rid of Jimmy here. So as I mentioned, the workflows, right, control the columns, right? So if we want to add a new column, we can click this plus button here and do like in review. That's easy, but I don't like doing it that way. This way is too simple. This is too easy, right? And so what that does is it doesn't always work either, by the way, right? It depends on your workflow. But the way I like to do it is I like to go to my project settings and I like to go to workflows, right? Because you got to remember that the beauty of being a company managed project is that you can get really detailed. You can get really involved with your workflows versus team managed projects. All you do is click that little plus button. So you'll be like, well, Alex, why do it the hard way? Right? Well, you do it the hard way because the hard way gives you more control and you get a lot more control. I'm just going to show you a couple of things here. So you'll notice that in review status that I just clicked the little plus button and I added it. It's right here. It just gets added automatically. So that's one way of adding it, right? But what are the different ways you can add, right? Well, you can come over here and click on add status and you can just click this status of accepted. I can just click on add and that creates a new status. Easy. But you'll notice when I'm adding a status that there's a little checkbox here. And this checkbox is very important because this right here is what divides the good admins from the bad admins, what divides the person that submits a request that's super annoying from the person that's not super annoying in your company, right? This checkbox does something magical. When you click on add, it essentially gives you this arrow that attaches itself, latches really to the right side of the status, and it's called all. And what it does is it allows you to transition from any status to any other status. So if I wasn't to do, I can go to accomplished. If I'm an accomplished, I can go to do. I can go to done. I can go anywhere that has an arrow. And this method divides people, right? Because what's super interesting about this method, and we're gonna hit publish. Actually, let me see if I can remove a status. Right now, okay, perfect. Let me remove it, right? If I hit publish, right? If I hit publish, that status of accomplished shows up, right? And so when I go back into my project and I'm back on my issue, right? You'll notice that I have a status of accomplished here. But the way Jira works is that by color, so all the gray ones, all the blue ones, and all the green ones, it's going to give it to you in alphabetical order. So you're going to have all your grays in ABC up there, all your blues in ABC there, and then all your greens in ABC there. And what that means is that the order in which you put them here doesn't matter. Notice that done is way up, second one, but it shows up as the last item, right? Done is the last item here. Oops, let me hit close. Done is the last one here because based on the color green, D comes after A. So a lot of teams don't like that, right? Because it creates this path of your team members, right? The users of Jira might be like, which status do I need to go to? If you were thinking just linearly. And so it creates problems, it creates chaos if your team's not mature enough to understand how their workflow works, right? The other problem that it creates is you can have an item that's in to do, and then your team's gonna be, check this out, I moved it to done immediately, and you just skipped through all the steps of that hard, carefully crafted workflow, right? So it lets you bypass everything. You can go from A through Z immediately. Some teams don't like that either, right? And so there's some drawbacks. There's simplicity, right? Obviously, it's awesome. We can just click the plus button. We got a new status in there. We can transition. From a Jira admin perspective, I love the little checkbox that allows me to transition from anywhere because it takes me seconds. I repeat, seconds to create these workflows. Awesome. But most of the time, again, that loosey-goosiness of this method is not usually good enough for more immature teams, right? Teams that need a little bit more discipline, a little bit more rigor. And so when you do need that, then you drastically have to change your perspective on how workflows work. You have to it becomes like an etch-a-sketch is the best way I can describe this, right? And so this, again, my ideal scenario, because it's super easy, right? But what happens with most teams, and this is where you get to become a little bit more artistic, right? So you can actually come in here and delete these checkboxes here. And when you do that, right, these statuses are very interesting, right? Because if it doesn't have a line going to it, if there's no line going into that that status disappears. And let me show you, right? So if I hit publish draft here, and I click on no, by the way, I've probably done like 2,000 workflows, and not once I've ever backed up my workflow. I don't know if that's just me. And in the comments, let me know if this is something common or not, right? But watch this. If I open up an existing issue, notice that I can't go to in progress anymore. It won't let me go back. It won't even let me go back to do. And that is because there's no transition. There's no arrow going into those statuses. Remember, I got rid of them, right? So just to remind you, to do has from the create, but nothing can come into to do. Nothing can go in or out of in progress, and nothing can go in or out of done. The only two statuses that you see available are these ones that still have a transition line that's in review and accomplished. So when I show it to you, you see, those are the only two statuses I can go to, right? And so it's critical, right, that you're understanding how these workflows work, because that is a very, very important thing to keep in mind. So what does this mean, right? What does this mean for you as a Jira admin? Well, that means that you have to always put a transition to connect these statuses together. So we're going to just do a simple one, right? So I'm going to go from to do to in progress. And when you do this, one of the reasons why I don't like it is because then you now need to give the transition a name. So I usually tell people it's a verb and your status should be nouns, but your mileage is going to vary, right? But now I'm going to do like start work, and you need to do this. So when you're a Jira admin, oh, great. And then it won't even let me do it with a with an active workflow. So this is a whole different problem, right? This is where our nightmares as Jira admins begin, because as I try to add this transition, it's not going to let me. And so now we begin the journey of, having to then make this workflow inactive. How do we make it inactive? Well, you got to grab the workflow. You got to go to the gear. You got to go to issues. You got to go to workflows. You got to find that workflow, hit enter. You're going to make a copy of the workflow. Okay. And once you make a copy of the workflow, I like to leave it like this as an inside joke. But once you do that, right, now I can do whatever the heck I want. So now I can do this, and I can say start work. You're not going to complain about it. And then I'm going to add another transition that says finish work. Now, if you're multitasking, I want you to stop here and pay special attention to what I'm about to tell you. When you are in an inactive workflow, that means I made a copy of an active workflow, or I made a brand new workflow altogether. This moment in life, this is where you want to do all your experimentation. This is where you want to add all the statuses, delete all the statuses, add all the transitions, delete all the transitions. Do everything you got to do in this moment in time, because once you publish that copied workflow back to the project, we're going to end up in the same scenario that when your team wants to modify the workflow, there's certain actions you can't do on an active workflow. So you got to make a copy. And this is where this joke of a copy comes into play, because you make a change, then you make a copy, then you apply it. And then somebody's like, oh, well, I wanted this one too. You're like, great. Now I got to go make a copy of the copy. You make that change, you publish it. And they're like, oh, but I forgot this. Right. And so get all your affairs in order here, right? Because it's gonna save you so much headache, right? And it's gonna save you these copies of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, right? Because it becomes a nightmare, right? And these copies don't delete, right? It just clutters your workflows, right? They're all in an inactive section, but you'll be scrolling for days just going through all these like copies of copies of copies. Versus get your requirements better documented at the beginning, right? Ask the questions, ask the discoverability questions. What do you want in the workflow? Because once I publish this workflow, it's a pain in the butt to figure it out again. So again, it's not that it's annoying, it's not that it's not possible, but it is just annoying. So anyways, so this workflow here works, right? And though this workflow is interesting, right? Because what this workflow is going to do is when I'm in to do, that drop down is going to say, hey, you can now go to in progress, or you can go to any of these two statuses. Okay. But guess what? If there is no arrow going that way or going in a special direction, you can't go that way. So if I have something in progress and I want to go back to do, notice that there's no arrow to go back to do. So this going like this, doing this method where most people optimize and design a forward-facing workflow. This is great. We'll be able to create these workflows one direction, but you can't go back. and that you'll find out real quickly. People want to go back. So always ask for the forward transition and the backwards transition, and just ask, because if you don't ask, you're just going to find yourself in these really annoying, tedious situations of making copies of copies and copies. So maybe at the beginning you'll struggle a little bit, but fortunately for you, you all watched this training, right? You got to see these are the things that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. So learn from my mistakes, right? Rodney says here, pet peeve, please, people, if your backup is no longer needed, delete inactive workflows. 100%, right? So like I mentioned, every time you make a copy of a copy, it grows this pile of like inactive workflows. And you want to just be mindful that that's growing, because 2, 3, 5, 10, I think Sean here last night told me he's been in Jira 18 years. So 18 years of workflows is going to accumulate a bunch of inactive workflows. So you want to clean up, because then you'll confuse yourself too. So anyway, so this is the workflow. Let's just assume this is the perfect workflow. This is what the customer wants. Who am I to challenge them, right? Well, notice that there's no publish button. So at this point, you're going like Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, like, what do I do next? Well, this is where you got to go back into the project. You got to go to project settings. You got to go to workflows. And you're going to add a workflow. And you're going to add from an existing workflow. Oh boy. I got 15 minutes. Let's see if my voice can hold that for another 15 minutes, because this is painful. You got to remember the name of your workflow, which I don't remember the name of my workflow. I'm going to have a really, really hard time remembering the name of my workflow. I think it's SD, it was copy of it. It starts with copy. So fortunately for you, they are in alphabetical order. So here it is. Okay. They're in alphabetical order. Who saved my butt right now. You can confirm that this is indeed the one that I made today. You're going to click on next, and then you got to pick which issue type. So now this gets a little bit more advanced. Let's just say that we wanted this workflow just for the taco. Well, we can just do it just for tacos. If you want it for all of them, you can just click the checkbox up here. If you just want it for the bug and the taco, you can do that, right? It's all up to you. And again, the requirements that your customer gave you, right? So this is where you got to have a really good relationship with whoever's creating requests, because the request that I usually get as a Jira admin is like, hey, can you add a status to my workflow? I'm like, cool. Which one? How? Which issue type? Right? Like, there's so many questions. So many questions. It's not just like a add a status. It's not that simple, right? That's why these team managed projects exist. That's why you don't need a Jira admin. You can just add a status. But in a company managed project, there's a lot of clarification questions. It's usually easier if you jump on a call. But this is what makes being a Jira admin hard, because there's a lot of ins and outs. There's a lot of things you got to know. And unfortunately, many of you are going to learn by trial and error, right? You're going to try things. You're going to get that big red pop-up that says, sorry, you can't do this. And then it's going to, then you cry yourself to sleep. That's ultimately what happened. You just end up crying yourself to sleep, right? But for this particular case, just to make things simple, I'm going to just apply it to all the issue types, keep it simple. And then click on finish. And now I publish. Now I can publish. And I can click associate, right? And when I do that, now my workflow, right? I can click on diagram here. Now this workflow exists. And if I go back to my project over here and I go back to my board, I can open up this in progress one. And guess what? $20, right? Who wants to bet in the chat? Who wants to bet some money with me, right? When I click this drop down, I expect to see done, accomplished, and in review. I do not expect to be able to go back to do. Anybody want to wager with me in the chat? Anybody want to bet against me? What do you guys think? Do you think I'm right, or do you think something else is going to pop up? Which statuses do you think are going to be shown when I click this drop down? Rodney says it's a fool's wager. Anybody want to take a guess? No more guesses, just Rodney. Sean says he likes the odds. So let's just do the drop down here, right? So when I click this drop down, we're going to see we have transition to in review, which I called. We have transition to accomplish, which I called. And then we have done. Notice I cannot go to do. And the reason that is because if you recall, there is no arrow from in progress back to do. There's a forward one to done. And then, of course, these let me go there. Now, what's really interesting, this is really cool. If I go to in review, right? This is because I made a dodo mistake. And in the chat, can I go back to do? Can I go back to in progress? And can I go back to done? Anybody want to let me know? What do y'all think? In the drop down, if I'm in the status of in review, can I go back to do? Can I bring it back? Anybody want to take a guess? Ronnie says nope. Let's find out. We can't, right? Because again, there is no transition. So this is where these arrows, these lines mean a lot inside of your workflow. So you want to spend time, a decent amount of time, architecting and solutionizing your workflow, but you want to also be careful, because there is a scenario where if you're not careful and you just do what your customer wants, you're going to end up with this. I can't spell Etch-a-Sketch. But you're going to end up with an Etch-a-Sketch, right? You're going to end up with a workflow that looks not as pretty as these, but let's see if I can find one. Wow, these are all like artistic Etch-a-Sketch pictures. I'm trying to find the Etch-a-Sketch where it's just a bunch of lines. Etch-a-Sketch lines, right? You'll end up with workflows that are like this. This is a great representation of what your workflows could look like. Heck, I've seen something like this, where you just end up with these crazy workflows, and good luck trying to understand which one goes where, right? So Rodney calls them spaghetti workflows, right? So it's a very dangerous place to get to, right? So there is a balance. You have to balance it out, and you have to kind of pick and choose. I cannot spell spaghetti or Etch-a-Sketch, so I'm screwed either way, Bob. All right, so that's kind of it on workflows. We got 10 minutes, really 5 minutes, because I do want to close out here a little early. I got another call to jump into. So the last thing that I want to talk about, because now that we covered that, is I want to talk about custom fields or fields in general. But first, before we do that, let's go answer some questions. So we got a question here. Also, it's a good idea to rename the statuses. Even if unpublished workflows, it will have an impact immediately in the whole system. Oh, it's not a good idea. So, Slava, if I could reach across the screen, I'd give you a high five and a hug, because I am of the belief that there are fireable offenses, and renaming your statuses is one of my 2 fireable offenses, as Bob says here, right? In case you're not sure what Slava and I are talking about here, if you go to your project settings and you're in your workflow, right, and you're like, hey, I don't want to call this one in progress. I want to call it in development, right? And so you come over here and you come here and you come to your in progress and you just click the edit button, because that last thing makes this way too easy. And you go in development. If I click save and you work for me, I just fired you. And 2, you just pissed off a lot of people. So if I don't fire you, somebody's gonna come after you anyways, and it's not gonna be good for you, right? Never, ever, 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 ever do what I just did, unless you just created the status and you can guarantee with 1,000,000% certainty that nobody else is using it at this moment in time, right? Which, again, if you just created it, high probability. But if you are modifying a if you're modifying an existing status like in progress, don't do this. The correct way to rename this is to create a new status called in development, right? Create new status, click on this, click add, change it to the category of in progress, click create, and then move the arrows like this. Move this arrow here, move this arrow here. But now you got a problem. You can't delete statuses from an active workflow. It won't let me. So now you got to make a copy of a copy, right? So now we're down back to that conversation, which is why I'm telling you, when you're creating a workflow, talk to your people when you're, it's a prime opportunity when you are in an inactive workflow to talk to as many people, your requirement people, as much as possible, because once they change their mind after you publish that workflow, you're just not going to be happy. I guarantee you, you're not going to be happy. So keep that in mind. All right. So let's get back to custom fields, right? So let's talk custom fields real quick. So I'm going to discard this draft. I don't want to do anything with it. What is a custom field, right? So what is a field in general? So when you open up Jira and you're inside of an issue, right? I'm going to open up this story number 1. Right? When you're in here, you have fields, right? So I can actually make this bigger and so you can see all of it, right? So you have the summary field up here, you have the description field, you have a reporter field, the labels, your favorite course, right? This is, of course, your beginner's Jira admin. So this is your favorite course, right? You have all these are fields. And these are all what I call default fields. They all ship with Jira. Okay, it's easy. They all exist in the wonderful world of Jira. But what happens when you want something special like favorite course, right? So maybe we're going to do this, right? Maybe we want a field to determine, is a taco a sandwich, right? And so there is no field in Jira that is called is a taco a sandwich with a drop down of yes or no, right? And so we can go into the gear and we can go to issues and we can go to custom fields here on the left, and we can look up for taco. We won't find anything. So we're just going to make a new field. So we click on create custom field and we're going to do a drop down. We're going to do a select list, single choice. I make thousands of custom fields every week. 99% of them, they're a drop down, select list, single choice. That's the most common one that I do. And then you're just going to do is a taco a sandwich? And I can't spell sandwich. There we go. Okay, and the option is going to be no and no, never, no way, not in a million years. Okay, and that's it. We're just going to hit create, right? And so once we do that, then we got to figure out what screen to put this on. So that spawns a whole new conversation for a whole different day, right? But what I like to do is I like to skip this because I don't usually remember my screens. So I just create the custom field. My taco now exists. I can see it here, but it doesn't belong to a project. So now what I can do is I can go back into my project. I can go to the project settings, and I can go to the screens. So I can go to issues, screens. And let's just say I want it for this right here. I can click on this screen here. And I can go to the bottom and I can type in taco and you're going to find it. And there it is. So I just added it. You can move the order so you can pick where it shows up better. But there's no save, which there's no publish either. So you just go back to your project. You open up your story. And now you're going to have is a taco sandwich. And you just select never, right? Because a taco is not a sandwich. I'm sorry to break your hearts. And that's pretty much it. So that's how you add custom fields to Jira. Super, super easy. But we have unfortunately run out of time. So at least we got to custom fields. I'm very excited that we got there. And so let's wrap this one up here. Let's go back to the slides here. And how do you take your skills to the next level, right? So a couple of things that you should be doing. One, scan that QR code. Two, become a member if you haven't already. I have different membership options. So I have my own personal membership options that allow you to buy like one-on-one time with me. Additionally, the Jira Life here has memberships. So if you just want to become a supporter of the Jira Life, you can do that. So there's that. You can follow me on LinkedIn, but if you're going to follow me on LinkedIn, just make sure you tell me that you're coming in from this ACE class, because otherwise I get a lot of requests. I tend to ignore them all. So put a little message in there and tell me where you're coming from. Make sure you go over to my main channel, subscribe to that one, subscribe to this channel, right? We are trying to get to our 4,000 hour mark. We're 500 hours away. So we have playlists. So if you can do us a huge favor and just kind of watch all the videos and accumulate some time there. Great podcast this entire year. The last 6 months, we've had a guest every single episode. So we have some really, really cool, amazing people from the Atlassian ecosystem, including Atlassian members themselves. So if you want to listen to some really cool, deep, meaningful conversations, and or just listen to Ronnie and Bob make fun of me all day, then that's the thing too. So go subscribe to the Jira Life. I do have free courses on Salto. So again, that QR code is going to take you over there. Go to those courses on Salto. And then this particular course, I have finished the material. I'm going to hit record as soon as I regain my voice. I'm going to hit record. It's going to be about 5 to 6 hours in depth, taking all the Jira admin stuff to the next level. So we go deeper to each one of these. So they're not rushed in just 60 minutes. It's like a full-fledged course. So that is coming to Udemy. If you click on that right now, it's going to take you to my Jira for Beginners. But I am working on a Jira admin for beginners that's going to be published on Udemy in the next week or two. So make sure you keep checking back for that course to drop. And that's pretty much it. Check out the merch store. We do have merch store for Jira and for the Jira Life, for ApeTech. And so again, if you want to help support the channel, if you found value out of this course, right, there's just so many different ways for you to help support and or take your skills to the next level. So that's pretty much it for this one. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Hopefully you got a lot of tremendous value out of this course. If you did, just maybe end the chat here with giving me a thumbs up, and I appreciate any feedback. So with that said, I do have a question here. So let's see if I can get to some questions. Not a good idea to. Yep, we covered that one, and then we got good thing it happened. No permissions and the issue type. It was an opportunity to show how to fix this. As Alex. So yeah. Learn from my mistakes, folks. The best way, if you walk away with anything, being a Jira admin is less about knowing the answers and more being curious, being curious enough to go, how does this work? Why does it work this way, right? And so I recommend go start your own Jira. They're completely free. You don't even need to put a credit card, and go experiment over there. And if your team has premium or enterprise, ask your leadership here to get you a sandbox. They're completely free. They're already included in your premium and enterprise subscriptions. Get yourself a sandbox, get yourself your own Jira, and go play. Roll up your sleeves. Go like full Miss Frizzle, right? Like make mistakes, get messy, right? Have some fun. You'll learn infinitely more than just taking the ACP's exam. So anyways, I am being summoned to my next call. So thank you again very much for being here. Appreciate you all being on this call. And give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the class. So we'll see you in July. Bye.